So welcome. We'll be doing a restorative practice today, and you're going to need some props, but you can improvise with whatever you have around your house. So if you can find two things that are this sort of height, they don't have to be hard, but something that's that kind of height. So maybe some books, or also like a couple of cushions or something would be fine. And then you're definitely going to want one blanket, or maybe even a few blankets, just to keep you cozy and warm. So they can look like anything. Then another thin blanket or like a towel, like a big beach towel or some kind of larger towel will be fine as a second prop. And then we're going to want something that is this shape-ish. If you have a bolster, that's wonderful. Or a blanket that you can roll up that's relatively thick might be good. So see what you can find around your house, and then when you're ready, come back. Great. So then, if you haven't taken a restorative class before, what we do in this class is maybe like 6 to 8 postures, which we hold for a really long time. So each posture is supported by the props that you've now found around your house. And so we want to find a shape that feels like there's not any effort in the shape at all. We're just seeing if we can sort of turn off all of our doing actions and rest into the shapes in a way that feels completely comfortable, completely supported, and that allows us to just sort of balance out our nervous system so that we're off of this sort of active resistance, fighting, and moving more towards a space where we can rest and digest and let the body actually do what the body does best on its own. We'll start lying down, and you can just find a comfortable way to lie down. Maybe you don't want any props at all. Or you could take that bolster or thick rolled up blanket under your knees so that the knees are a little bit bent. This will be especially helpful if you have any issues in your low back, a tendency to feel strain in your low back. And then you can lie down flat on your back. So let the shoulders and the head rest heavily into the floor. The arms are by your sides, the palms facing up. And closing your eyes, and start to turn your attention inwards. If you're feeling coolish here, then maybe you're getting that blanket and putting it over yourself so that you're cozy. It's kind of like tucking yourself back into bed. And the nice thing about having so much time in each of our shapes is that we can take lots of time to get settled into the shape. So there's no rush in arriving. Maybe as you're beginning to get a little bit heavier here, you're noticing that something doesn't feel exactly right. And you have the opportunity then to shift, adjust, get any little fidgets out, find different props or adjust your props so that it feels perfect. It feels like somewhere you really want to stay. Once we found that place that feels the most comfortable, you start to allow the weight of your body to settle completely into the floor, surrendering your whole weight to the tug of gravity. You begin by becoming aware of the structures of the body that we're most familiar with, so we can let the bones feel a little bit heavier, can allow the bigger muscles to relax. Maybe we have some awareness of sensation in the skin. We can allow the skin to feel a little bit softer. And then as those more familiar places relax, we start to turn our attention more closely towards the body, into sensation in the body. Then we become more able to see some of the less familiar areas, some of the areas of the body that we tend to overlook or ignore. Smaller muscles, deeper muscles, areas of the body that are more internal, sensations in the body that are more subtle. You can start to see the patterns of holding that are typical in our bodies. For lots of us, that's holding around the area of the face, the jaw, the point between your eyes, holding in the throat, in the neck, in the shoulders, in the chest. Hardness or gripping in the deeper belly. And once we specifically allow those areas to become a little bit softer, then there's perhaps more ease or room for our breathing. So we don't have to do any special kind of breathing practice in the restorative class. We're allowing the breath to be as natural and as smooth as possible. But we'll notice that as we become more relaxed, the breath is able to subtly change. When we're responding to stress, then typically the breath is more shallow and faster. And as we set the body up in a shape where there's no stimulus for stress, and we see if we can cultivate in our mental space a calmness and a clarity which allows us to feel less mental stress, then the breath can become deeper and slower. Because we stay in these shapes for so long, the tendency of the mind is to wander, to start looking for something to do. So often it's helpful to train our attention, to attune all of our senses to following the breath in the body as a way of just staying in this present moment. And when the mind is allowed to wander, then probably the mind wanders towards mental stress. And so if we can stay in this moment with our breathing, we can continue to cultivate more of that calm environment. And again, we don't have to do anything special with the breath. We're simply watching the path of the breath in the nose, in the throat. Feel how the breath fills the space of the lungs. You might notice what the capacity of your lungs is. So we feel breath not just in the front of the body, but also in the sides and the back of the body. And then we feel the impact of that breathing in the belly, maybe even into the pelvis. The inhales give us a sense of spaciousness, maybe a gentle expansion. And as we exhale and empty all of those areas, we find more capacity for softness, for weight, for release. So we can follow with our mental attention the physical experience of the breathing. But we also know that the breath is carried via the blood to every cell in the body. The breath reaches into every area of your body. And so maybe on some level you can also follow your breathing into your arms and your legs in your hands, in your feet, in your face. Follow your breathing into the whole space of your skin. As we travel with the breath through the body, we might notice where the body needs more tenderness, where we might feel those qualities of expansion and softening in specific areas of the body, where we're holding or gripping to some mental or emotional or physical tension. We'll just stay here for another handful of breaths. Continuing to listen to your own breathing. And I will let you know when it's time to move on to the next shape. As we start to get ready to move into the next shape, consider that the transitions are as important to the practice as the poses themselves. So we treat each transition with the same care and attention that we give to the poses. So just moving really slowly as you find your way to the next shape. We'll just roll that bolster or blanket out from underneath your legs if you've placed it there, so that you can come to lying flat on your back. And always when we're finding shapes here, you can feel free to modify or adjust or explore options that I don't offer, so that you get the shape that really makes sense for you. We're going to reach the arms up behind the head now. Just find a nice long stretch forward through your toes, back through your fingertips. Good. And then from here, moving into a side bend, we'll first take the legs over to the right. So without rolling your hips in any direction, both of your hips are still heavy onto the floor. So that left hip is connected to the mat. We're just placing the legs over to the right. You can cross your left ankle over your right ankle if that makes sense for you. There's a little bit of added sensation. So starting to find a tug through the outer line of the left side body. And then from here, we could also shift the arms over to the right. And maybe we loop the right hand around the left wrist and just give a little tug back on that left arm so that there's a longer shape through the upper half of the left side body. So you can think of like a banana here. With your lower body, you're forming the lower curve of that banana, and the upper body makes the top curve of the fruit. If this doesn't feel good for your shoulders, then look for some other shape that makes sense for you. You might even have your shoulders placed more, your arms placed more shoulder height on the mat. And then we start to, again, draw our attention towards the breathing. If the breath feels uncomfortable, then that's always the first clue that the shape is not exactly right. And again, we can take as much time as we need to find our way into the shape that feels really perfect. Once we arrive at a physical space which allows for comfortable breath, then we can start to notice specifically how this shape creates possibility for opening in the body. So you can feel how the breath travels specifically in the left side, how the breath moves into the space between your side ribs, how the breath reaches into the side waist. Maybe we feel the gentle tug of the breath through the outer left hip and along the outer left thigh. Maybe we feel it up into the left shoulder and through the length of the left arm. Most importantly, I can't actually tell you what you feel or what you should feel even. The point is rather to explore what it is that arises specifically for you. And again, if what arises is a sense of discomfort, then that's a clue to change the shape, to find something that supports you more comfortably. I should specify, if what arises is physical discomfort, then perhaps we need to change the shape. Sometimes what arises is a kind of emotional discomfort, and that might be something that we explore. Maybe it feels easy for you to settle into these longer holds. Maybe it feels easy for you to rest your mind. Maybe you really are able to enjoy this experience of just staying with a shape, sinking into a shape. Maybe what you feel is a sense of wanting to move or wanting to do something. Maybe you feel some kind of anxiety. So the practice isn't necessarily easy, even though it might be physically relaxing, physically simple. And we see if we can just breathe into whatever it is that arises for us individually. We can use this time to explore those sensations, to let those sensations be alive in our bodies. And sometimes we're able to allow deeper emotional discomforts to rise to the surface, and by allowing them to rise to the surface and be seen, we also then are able to let them go. We're going to slowly find our way back towards center. So bring your legs and your arms back to that palm line. Maybe again take a nice long stretch out forward through your toes, back through your fingertips. And then we'll change sides. So bringing the legs over to the left, maybe crossing your right ankle over your left ankle. And then you might also take your arms over to the left. You might loop your left hand around your right wrist just for a little gentle tug back on the arm. And then again, resettling in the shape that feels good for you. You can change the shape of the arms here if this alignment isn't comfortable for your shoulders. props to look for support where you need it. Make sure again that both of your hips are heavy into the floor, so that right hip is equally rooted to the left. You start to explore that gentle tug along the right side waist. You feel how the breath reaches its fingers into the spaces between your right side ribs. You might explore length in the outer right thigh, length up the right arm. Seeing if you can become quiet enough that the more subtle voices in your body are able to be heard. And then resting with whatever it is that comes up for you. There's never any right thing to feel or right way to be doing this pose. And talk about the restorative practice being a space where the nervous system can become more conducive to digestion and processes of healing and restoration in the physical body. But I think this space is also a space where we can allow for mental processing and mental digestion. Especially in these strange times that we're in, this is perhaps so important to take time to simply digest all of the information and all of the emotion that we're experiencing. And we'll slowly come back towards center. Again, you might, as you find that neutral line, find a longer stretch out through the fingers and the toes. And then you bring your arms back about shoulder height on the floor. We'll bend the knees, place the soles of the feet to the floor. And from here, moving into a gentle twist. You might find that you want those two blocks or cushions that are block thickness for this shape. So we'll first take the hips over to the right, and then you can let your knees settle to the left, and you might choose to place a block or a cushion under your left thigh so that the legs don't have to come over so far. Or you might choose to place a block or a cushion between your thighs so that that right leg is a little bit more supportive. So explore what's most comfortable for you. You might find that no support is necessary. And once you've arrived in a comfortable shape with the legs, you can see if you can let that right shoulder settle back towards the floor. So the block should allow you to find the right amount of spinal twist so that there's a little bit of sensation, kind of a squeezing out around the center body, the hips, the ribs turning away from each other, but not too much sensation. We're always looking for just enough to let us know that there's a little change happening in the body, that we're encouraging some spaciousness or perhaps even some compression. But nothing that is overwhelming. If the sensation is so strong that it overtakes your ability to see everywhere else in your body or to feel your way through the rest of your body, then we've gone too far. So in this shape, this sense of compression around the center body is a little bit of a squeezing out, it's a gentle hug for your core. Is creating a little bit of a squeeze around the center organs of the body. And maybe when we twist, first with the upper body towards the right, and then what we'll do next is upper body twisting towards the left. We can aid the flow of digestion. And also when we create this little squeeze around the center of the body, those organs, when we come out of the shape, will receive a fresh flush of blood. So although it doesn't feel like we're doing that much, there is a real physical effect to this practice. And the most important ingredient is not the intensity of that sensation, but rather the time with which we give to that sensation. The important ingredient is that we stay here for a little while. Again, you can notice how your breath is traveling in your body, specifically in this shape. Maybe we feel more room for the breath through the right side of the torso. Maybe we feel some room now for the breath in the chest or even the backs of the shoulders. And then especially as we're exhaling, we notice that the belly responds to that exhale by moving inwards. And that allows us to settle into the twist a little bit more comfortably. And we don't have to do anything. We're simply watching our breathing and watching the automatic response of the body to the breath. In general, I like to think of the relationship between your breath and your body as a kind of conversation, that the breath is always asking a question. If we're watching the breath, we can see that the breath is questioning something like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? And then we listen for the response. So again, we'll just take a few moments here to listen to that question and answer. And I'll let you know when it's time to change shape. Slowly finding your way over to the other side. So you might just remove those props out of the way first so that we can bring the hips back to center. Always find the neutral before you find the other side. So bringing your hips back in line with your shoulders and just feeling where that center is. And then we'll shift the hips over to the left, settling the knees down to the right. And again, finding the support that you need. So option to place a block or a cushion under your right thigh and or between your legs. If you need something else that I haven't suggested, of course, find whatever else it is that you need. And we're seeing if we can look for just the right amount of spinal twist so that the shoulders feel comfy against the floor. The hips and the ribs are turning away from each other, just the right amount. And we get this little bit of a squeeze around the center body, like you're giving your center the most loving hug. yourself time to be here in this shape, to process the sensations of the shape, to process the emotions that arise in the shape, to digest whatever it is that needs digesting in your experience right now. And I'll be here for a few more minutes still, and again I will let you know when it's time to find the next transition. Slowly find our way back towards center, and you might first remove any support that you've placed between your legs, bringing your knees back towards the ceiling, rooting the feet to the floor, aligning your hips again exactly centered with your shoulders. And then from here, we'll just roll comfortably onto the right side. So you're coming into a little sort of fetal shape. Your spine can be rounded, knees bent. Rest your head on your right arm. And then using your left hand to press yourself carefully up, coming to a seat. So we'll find another shape which opens up the spine. Looking for a little bit of a back bend here. You're going to take that thin blanket or towel also would be fine, whatever it is that you came up with at home. And what we want to do is roll it into kind of a long tube. So if it could be about that length, depending on whatever it is you're using. Something this sort of thickness. You might find that more thickness is good for you. You might find that less thickness is good for you. But that is the general shape. We're going to lay that roughly to where your shoulder blades fall when you come down to lie on your back. You can also get your bolster or that thicker blanket to place under your knees again. So what we want to look for when we come down is that the blanket lands exactly at the bottom tips of your shoulder blades. So you might want to have a little look here to make sure that you understand The shoulder blades themselves are on the floor. Your arms are above the line of that blanket. It's just giving a little bit of lift to the lower part of your ribs. So it's not under the upper back, it's not under the lower back, but exactly between where those two parts of your spine meet. And it should feel like just a comfortable bit of lifting, and we don't want too much sensation. If it's too much, then maybe what we need to do is just unroll whatever little support we've created for ourselves. So you have kind of a flatter tail and then just a smaller roll, and then you can try that. Again, making sure that it's really under the bottom tip of your shoulder blades. If you can't find a shape which is comfortable with the back supported, you may choose to just lie down flat on your back again instead. And again, taking all of the time that you need to get settled here into the shape that's right for you, making sure that you're warm enough. Making sure that the sensation is subtle so that it doesn't overwhelm. What we might feel now is a little bit of encouragement for mobility in the spine, more room for the breath in the front ribs, maybe a sense of lengthening through the belly. Focusing on traveling with your breath into the space of your body, back towards the tip of your nose, and then again into the space of your body, so that the thread of your breath is always leading you into the present moment. Probably inevitable that at some point your mind wanders off into some story about the past or the future, something that's not right here. So our effort is to simply, gently remind ourselves to come back to being with our breathing, being in our bodies. Maybe this whole practice is simply an act of remembrance, of remembering that we are here right now, that we are alive in this moment. This pose is called mountain brook pose, and it's one of my favoritely named poses because it mimics the shape of water flowing over smooth stones. You can imagine that the props under your knees and under your ribs are like stones in a riverbed, and your body is water. So although the restorative practice gives us the impression of moving towards stillness, it allows us actually to become more aware of movement and change in the body. We notice the flow of the breath. If we get really quiet, maybe we can feel some sensation of the flow of the blood or the rhythm of the heartbeat. We can feel how things are shifting and softening as we stay in the shape. We can know that our bodies are constantly transforming themselves. That our cells are constantly regenerating. So maybe as a way to hold your attention to your body, you can become more aware of that change. Like becoming aware of the constant change of your body, perhaps we can start to let go of our attachment to permanence. We can know that nothing is the same between one moment and the next. Maybe in times of great uncertainty, it feels like some solid foundation has been shaken, but really, this isn't any different from any other time. The future is always uncertain. The only thing that we have that is for sure is this moment right now in your body. And perhaps that's an opportunity to be delighted by this moment in your body, to find the joy of just being alive and being in the sensation of this body. Come out of this shape, you can again just slowly kind of roll off to one side, bringing a hand to the floor so that you're able to press yourself up. We'll move into a few kind of forward folding, hip opening shapes now. You may want to spread your towel or your thinner blanket out on your mat underneath of your knees so that you have a little bit more padding, especially if you find that you're on a hard floor and it's a little bit tender on the knees. We're going to bring the tops of the feet to the floor, the big toes touching, kind of sitting towards the heels, and then taking that bolster or thicker blanket and seeing if you can place it between your knees so that we can come into a happy baby shape, a child's pose shape. And you might find that you have difficulty folding into the hip creases, so it's not that accessible to let your torso rest down. In that case, see if you can build up the support underneath you. So just find more that you can place underneath your body so that you're able to comfortably rest your torso down with one cheek to the bolster or the blanket that you're on. Doesn't matter which cheek, we'll change sides. And then you might notice that you have difficulty settling into the knee creases. In that case, you would take maybe some more support between your thighs and your calves. Again, whatever you can find at home that works for you. So take once more all of the time that you need and all of the creativity that you need in improvising with your props so that you can settle into this shape comfortably. Once you've rested that one cheek onto your bolster, seeing if you're going to let your head go, let your shoulders soften around the edges of the bolster. Allow your hips to be as heavy as possible so that you can feel maybe a little bit more restfulness in that area of the hip creases, the knee creases, the weight of your body sinking towards the floor. Noticing now the capacity for breath in the back of your body, backs of the shoulders, maybe even into the mid-back, the lower back, the back of the hips, that wide area at the back of your pelvis. Maybe you're able to use your breath as a way of asking that question, how are you feeling, to each part of your body? And then simply listening to what the response is. And sometimes knowing how we're feeling, really knowing how we're feeling, is the first step in initiating change so that we can feel better. Sometimes change takes a long time, and so simply knowing how we're feeling is where we rest. And knowing that we don't have to fix everything right now, today, is enough. Just give space to that feeling. We'll slowly turn the head to the other side, just so we get an even experience in the neck. So you're resting your other cheek to the bolster, and then resettling the head as heavily as possible. And again, we'll just stay here for another handful of breaths, settling into sensation. Using your breath as a tool to keep you alive in the moment. Start to find your way out of this shape by bringing your hands alongside your bolster and pressing yourself slowly back up towards the seat. We'll take the hips off to one side. I'm going to start to build up a little bit of a tower with all of the props that you have available to you. And you might find again that you need more props or some kind of improvisation to get the right height. Some options here, you could sit with your legs straight out in kind of a straddle shape. Maybe a relatively narrow straddle shape is enough. Or you could bring the soles of the feet together and let the knees soften out to the sides. If you feel that you need support under your knees here, you can do that either with the legs bent, or if you have your legs straight and you feel that a little bit of support under the bend of the knees you can find that. And then we're going to start to just stack up whatever it is we can find until we get the right height so that you're able to just kind of comfortably lean forward and rest your head onto something. We want to ideally have just the forehead resting so that the nose is free to breathe. So if you're relatively open along the back line of the body, you might find that you don't need too much of a tower here. If that's a stiffer area in your body, you might find that you need to gather lots of things to get up to a good height. So take your time again to find the shape that's right for you. And your arms can be resting on top of your props or tucked in somewhere between your props or down to the floor. So lots of options there as well. Once you've found the right shape, then you can start to direct the breath again into the back of the body. Explore that sensation of expansion in the backs of the shoulders, the mid-back, the low back, the back of the hips. And then perhaps we feel how that line of breath and that chain of muscles wraps around the back of the hips and into the back of the legs or the outer legs, depending on how you set your legs up. So we simply follow the breath and see the qualities of growth that the inhale provides and the opportunities for softening that the exhale provides. Once more, if you encounter an area which feels especially tender, then perhaps you're able to direct more of the sense of your breath, more of your attention into that specific area. And what we encounter in terms of tension might be physical, might be emotional or mental. What we often find is emotional or mental tension which has a physical location. Whatever it is that comes up, perhaps you can use your breath to comb through or untangle, to loosen whatever it is that's knotted in your body. Taking a few more slow, steady breaths here in this shape. Slowly find your way back up to seated. You might use an inhale to carry yourself back up. Coming into one last shape which combines a little bit of a sense of mobility in the spine and spaciousness in your hips. You can take your bolster or blanket thick blanket-like thing behind you, so that you have a tube behind your spine. You might place a second kind of folded up blanket or some support that's soft on top of that for a little pillow for your head. And then we'll take our two block or cushion things to the sides of the mat and bring the soles of the feet together and let the knees soften out to the side so that those two blocks or whatever you're using can support the thighs or support the knees. So find the right height for yourself so that the knees feel settled without any strain. Again, using a blanket to keep yourself cozy here. And finding your way down onto your back so that you're resting your spine along the length of the bolster and so that your head rests comfortably on the support of the bolster or whatever you've set up on top of the bolster. So you might find that you need to shimmy forward a little bit if your torso is relatively long. And then we just let the arms drape around the edges of the bolster so that we can get some space in the point where the arm bone connects into the torso. So maybe a quality of width across the chest. And find an openness in your face, in your throat, in your heart, in your belly. Across the front of your pelvis, along the inner lines of your thighs. We see here if we can especially let the hips relax so that the thigh bones can drop heavily into the support that you have. So there's no effort to move the knees downwards, but rather we let go of the hips so that the knees can comfortably settle. We'll spend a little while here. I'd like to share a poem from Mary Oliver, who's one of my most favorite poets. And the reason I wanted to share this poem in particular is that it's initially about death, but actually about life. And I think that the situation that we're in, it brings into sharp focus our own mortality, or the mortality of the people that we love most. And it brings into focus the fragility of lots of aspects of our society, but perhaps for some of us also the fragility of our own livelihoods. But it's an opportunity as well to think about how we're living. When death comes, like the hungry bear in autumn, when death comes and takes all the bright coins from his purse to buy me and snaps the purse shut, when death comes like the measles pox, when death comes like an iceberg between the shoulder blades, I want to step through the door full of curiosity, wondering, what is it going to be like, that cottage of darkness? And therefore I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood, and I look upon time as no more than idea, and I consider eternity as another possibility. And I think of each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy, and as singular, and each name a comfortable music in the mouth, tending, as all music does, towards silence. And each body a lion of courage and something precious to the earth. When it's over, I want to say, all my life I was a bride married to amazement. I was the bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I have made my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world. As we spend a few more moments in this shape, perhaps noticing any residue of fear or any sense of being full of argument. And seeing instead if we can find more of that sense of amazement, sense of taking the world into our arms. Not just having visited the world in this body, but having been more aware, more alive in this body. first, take your hands to your outer thighs and gather your knees towards center. You might shift those blocks out of the way, and then we'll roll off to the right side, landing again in a kind of fetal shape. You might partially land on whatever prop you have, or you could rest your head onto your right arm, finding again something that's restful for you. And then bringing yourself slowly up to seated. Coming to a comfortable seat, maybe cross-legged or whatever is good for yourself. And just for a moment here, with your eyes closed, continuing to turn your attention inwards. Let the weight of your hips settle heavily into the floor and start to bring a little bit more alertness into your spine. So there's just the smallest effort in holding the spine upright, still letting the face and the shoulders maintain that relaxed quality. And carry some of the softness that you've cultivated into the rest of your day. And bringing your hands together at the center of your chest, and thank yourself for making time to settle into